This is Infinity, and in today's hour-long episode, I'll tell you about the most unusual and mysterious finds that have astounded scientists. I'll show you the unexplained things found inside the Egyptian pyramids, in an underwater cave, and in the snows of Siberia. You'll learn about ancient viruses found in the ice, as well as ancient structures and technologies of extraterrestrial origin. Sit back, relax, and let's go! Black hole of death. Several years ago, a team of American scientists from the University of Tennessee presented interesting results of the study of an underwater cave in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, dubbed the Black Hole of Death. The contents of the cave, which was flooded many thousands of years ago, have long sparked intense scientific interest. But it wasn't until 2017 that scientists discovered a number of startling finds here. Diving down to a depth of 55 meters to the bottom of the cave, scientists stumbled upon an entire cemetery of Pleistocene animal remains. The remains of 3 different types of giant ground sloths were identified. One of them was not even known to science. Also, the remains of such animals as short-faced bears, mountain lions, saber-toothed cats, and tapirs were also found in the Black Hole of Death. But the most interesting and striking find was that of human remains. Examining the bones, the experts found that they're about 13,000 years old. According to scientists, it's the most complete and earliest human skeletons in America. As the researchers think, this discovery may shed light on how the first humans settled the continent at the end of the Ice Age. Last year, archaeologists made an even more interesting and shocking discovery that stunned them, because according to it, people inhabited the territory of North America much earlier than expected. In the cave of Chiquihite in the mountains of the Mexican state of Zacatecas, a team of archaeologists discovered 1,900 stone tools, fragments of animal bones, and the remains of plants and charcoal which are more than 30,000 years old. This suggests that humans were present in the region about 10,000 years earlier than previously thought. Scientists have determined the age of the 59 artifacts found. Radiocarbon analysis showed that they're about 33,000 years old. This suggests that people may have been in America before the so-called last glacial maximum, which began about 26,000 years ago. But that's not all that's interesting. As the scientists said, the blades and spearheads found here were made in rather elaborate ways. Most of these tools were not made from the gray limestone common in the area, but from dense varieties of that rock. Consequently, the material for the tools was specifically sought out, indicating a deliberate choice and a thorough knowledge of the available stone raw materials. As the scientists emphasize, this collection of finds represents a stone culture unlike any known in the Americas today. Skull. Several years ago, during excavations in the Georgian city of Dmanisi, scientists discovered an unusual skull which is 1.8 million years old. This skull has an unusual structure. It combines a small cranium, which could develop a brain no more than 546 cubic centimeters in size, an elongated face, and large teeth. A brain of such size could belong to Australopithecus, but other features of the structure of the skull make us attribute its former owner to the genus Homo, although it's not clear to which of its species. In general, over the past 20 years, scientists have found skulls and bones of 5 human ancestors in Dmanisi, along with the bones of animals, including saber-toothed cats and the European cheetah. The remains of all 5 individuals were found in burrows where they were presumably dragged by predators. Had these remains been found in different places, they would probably have been assigned to different species in the genus Homo. But scientists know that these individuals lived in the same place and at the same time, geologic time, so they could represent one population of the same species. Scientists believe that all individuals belong to the same species, Homo erectus. Thus, the Georgian finds may change scientists' understanding of human ancestors, as well as the history of their settling around the world. Marble sarcophagus. You've probably heard all about the Trojan War. The legendary war of the Greeks against the Trojans was described by ancient writers including Homer, who recounted it in the Iliad and the Odyssey. Scientists believe that Troy really existed. This is indicated by the discovery of archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann, who in the late 19th century discovered the hill of Hisarlik in western Turkey. There he found the ruins of the citadel of Troy described in Homer's poems. Okay, but what about the Trojan War? Most scholars believe that this war was a figment of Homer's imagination. Others believe that Homer only partially incorporated real events into his works, and others are convinced that Homer described the real war. This sounds crazy, but a recent find may point precisely to the latter being right. In 2015, an unusual marble sarcophagus was found in an olive orchard in the northwest province of the Iznik district of Bursa, Turkey. Scientists determined that it supposedly dates back to the era of the Roman Empire and that it's about 2,000 years old. This artifact consists of several small statues. Experts were able to ascertain that the sarcophagus depicted the Trojan War, King Agamemnon, and the warrior Achilles. Sculptures representing the spring, summer, and fall seasons were also found on the other side of the sarcophagus. Scientists were struck by this find because, in their opinion, it can tell the story of the Trojan War and confirms that this war actually took place. The artifact has been carefully studied for several years by art historians who may soon make important discoveries. Los Lunas Decalogue Stone. In the hidden mountain near the North American village of Los Lunas, which is located in New Mexico, there's an unusual rock. This boulder, weighing about 80 to 100 tons, is of great interest because it has the text of the Ten Commandments carved into it in Hebrew. The inscriptions themselves are presumably about 2,000 years old. This is what attracts the attention of scientists. It's not clear how the ancient Jewish commandments ended up in North America long before the Vikings discovered it, and even more so before the arrival of Columbus. Trying to unravel the mystery, the scientific world is divided into two camps. The first group asserts that the stone and the inscription on it are authentic. In their view, the text on the stone was inscribed by representatives of one of the 10 lost tribes of Israel who somehow, miraculously, came to the New World. The others believe the artifact to be a fake. But is it true? After all, a powerful argument in favor of the antiquity of the inscription is that the inhabitants of Los Lunas learned about the stone as early as 1880. At that time, only a narrow circle of specialists knew about the Hebrew alphabet. Would any of them have created such an artifact on purpose? Many researchers believe this to be absurd and that the stone is evidence that Jews traveled to the Americas before Columbus. Chinese sword. The fact that people from other continents visited America earlier than we think may be indicated by another find, which was discovered in 2014. It was also found in the American South in Georgia. In July 2014, an amateur archaeologist accidentally stumbled upon a Chinese votive sword sticking out of the bank of a small stream. The 30-centimeter-long artifact immediately caught the attention of scientists. Exquisitely carved from jade, the sword has surface oxides and mineralization, indicating its ancient age. The sword is very old indeed. Many of the symbols on it, as well as the sword itself, are found in most ancient Chinese jade objects, which root back to the time of the Ji dynasty, which, according to traditional belief, ruled ancient China from the 21st to the 18th centuries BC. Similar swords were also found later, but all of them were made before our era. According to some scholars, this does not mean that the artifact came to America before our era. However, according to their assumption, it happened before Columbus reached the New World. If this version is confirmed, then scientists can fill in the gaps in Chinese and world history and revise history, taking into account the role of Chinese navigators in relation to the exploration of the Americas. Last December, a very important find for the religious world was discovered in the Czech Republic. Part of the nail from the cross on which Jesus Christ was supposedly crucified was found in the Milovesko Monastery. The find was discovered during the examination of the walls of the Church of St. Elijah. Creating their three-dimensional model by scanning, experts suggested that one of the walls has a niche representing a secret corridor. In fact, a recess was found in one of the walls with the remains of a casket decorated in gold and silver plates. A cross and the letters IR, which stands for King Jesus, were engraved in the top of the box and marked religious artifacts. Inside, there was a piece of forged nail and a bent gold cross. Archaeologists have suggested that the relic is indeed part of the crucifixion. The discovery in the face of Milivesco Monastery is extremely important in terms of science and Christianity because it may force scientists to reconsider their views on world history. This is not surprising because the cultural and historical value of this find cannot be overestimated. Now the hierarchs of the Catholic Church are interested in the artifact. Next, I'll take you to Egypt. I'll show you new findings in the mysterious land of the pharaohs that have frightened scientists. You'll learn whether ancient Egyptian burial grounds might conceal living plague bacteria, how and why the first Roman mummy appeared, and who Tutankhamun's children were. Plague of Cyprian. Over the past 15 years, the Egyptian city of Luxor has been actively excavated. Archaeologists were able to find several mummies buried in the 3rd century BC. But all of them were thickly covered with lime. This meant that in front of the scientists, there were the victims of the plague. The bodies were buried with such haste that not even half of the burial rituals known to historians were followed. But should we look further for bodies in this burial ground? We used to think that the worst plague epidemics took place in the Middle Ages, but even in the ancient world, the disease was just as troublesome. One of the most severe periods in ancient history was the Plague of Cyprian, an epidemic that broke out in the Roman Empire in the 3rd century BC. It was so named in honor of Saint Cyprian, Bishop of Carthage, who in his book called Mortality gave the most complete description of the symptoms of the disease. Perhaps archaeologists should reread this work and think twice before removing plague victims from their graves. Cones on the heads. Strange headdresses, which for many years were considered a figment of imagination of ancient Egyptian artists, turned out to be quite real. In the drawings that survive to our days, scientists noted that the heads of some ancient Egyptians were crowned with small cones. Especially often, they appeared in images made 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Now, for the first time, archaeologists have actually identified 2 such cones made of wax and decorating the heads of skeletons that are around 3,300 years old. The finds were excavated in the cemeteries of the city of Akhetaten, also known as Amarna. The excavations confirmed that 3-dimensional, wax-based head cones were sometimes put on the dead in ancient Egypt. By the way, they were not just on the elite people. The idea that the living people also wore these cones leaves questions. How often and why? It was believed that such unusual headdresses were worn by nobles. Most likely, these cones consisted of wax or solid fat mixed with incense. The material gradually melted, imparting an exquisite fragrance to the hair and skin of its wearer. There was, however, another hypothesis. Some scholars believe that the ancient Egyptians did not wear any cones. In fact, the cones were symbols to indicate a person's high status. In 2020, a sensational find was made by archaeologists in the ancient city of Saqqara. A total of 13 intact and sealed coffins were found by the scientists. The anthropomorphic sarcophagi were found in a mine which is 11 meters deep. Inside it, scientists also came across 3 sealed niches. These sarcophagi are around 2,500 years old. They're very well preserved and even still retain some of their original colors. It's noteworthy that these sarcophagi were neatly stacked on top of each other. This indicates that in ancient times they were moved from other tombs. This is a common practice in ancient Egypt. The priests often moved the coffins of important people to hiding places known only to them in order to protect them from tomb robbers. Initial studies have shown that throughout its history, the sarcophagi have never been opened. For the scientists, this is a great stroke of luck. In addition, additional studies have already been announced. Scientists believe that there may be other sarcophagi in the mine. But is it worth to open the sarcophagi that were in one of the most famous burial grounds of ancient Egypt? Surely, during the years of legal and illegal archaeological excavation, treasure and antiquity seekers have stumbled upon them more than once. But they decided to leave them sealed for some reason. Maybe there was a reason behind it all. The first Roman mummy. In 2010, a surprising find was discovered in a desert oasis in western Egypt. Among the many burials in the oasis, there was a strange sarcophagus. Presumably, the mummy of a woman was stored inside it. She was buried during the Roman rule in ancient Egypt, and it goes without saying, if you look at the sarcophagus, scientists believe that the find can be safely declared the first Roman mummy. The appearance of the sarcophagus is strikingly different from those that archaeologists have found before. The stone sculpture on the lid is more reminiscent of traditional Roman sculptures than the royal bas-reliefs of the Egyptians. Unfortunately, scientists were unable to find out anything about the identity of the buried woman. The mummy was richly dressed, but no distinctive symbols indicating her origin or profession were found in the sarcophagus. However, there is still a chance to shed some light on this mystery because scientists continue to excavate in the oasis. Who knows? Maybe soon we will know who was the first Roman mummy. The oldest village. We used to think that the ancient Egyptians were the creators of one of the first developed civilizations on our planet. But people inhabited the Nile Valley long before the builders of the pyramids came there, who were the predecessors of the pharaohs. A team of Egyptian and French archaeologists conducted extensive excavations in the Nile Delta to find the answer to this question. North of Cairo, they were able to find a chain of villages which presumably belonged to the Neolithic period. They're more than 7,000 years old. Unique finds indicate the presence of permanent settlements in the swampy areas of the Nile Delta from the 5th millennium BC. That is at least 2,500 years before the construction of the pyramids in Giza. Fragments of earthenware and stone tools were found at the site of the excavations. Scientists now hope to gain new information about the development of the irrigation system. Ancient Egyptians constructed artificial canal sleeves from the Nile, helping to supply crops with the necessary moisture in times of drought. So far, scientists think that the villagers did not have sufficient knowledge about irrigation and therefore depended heavily on the rains for their farming operations. Ark of the Covenant. The biblical events that we read about in the Holy Writings took place over 2,000 years ago. Some of the objects and artifacts mentioned in the Old and New Testament did exist and have even been found by scientists. It's not known how many of them are actually later forgeries, but now archaeologists are more interested in finding biblical artifacts that researchers of the past have never been able to find. One such artifact is the Ark of the Covenant. Described in the Old Testament, the sacred object was an ark in which the stone tablets of the covenant with the 10 Commandments were kept. It's believed that the Ark of the Covenant was seized by the Egyptians almost immediately after Solomon's death during an attack on Judea and taken by them to the city of Tanis in Egypt. It's this version that was the basis of Steven Spielberg's movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. No one knows exactly where the Ark may be kept. One can only hope that it can be stumbled upon by chance, and this hope is not without meaning. In 2020, near Jerusalem, in the ancient settlement of Beit Shemesh, archaeologists were excavating a temple that was 3,100 years old. They discovered a stone tablet in the temple that resembled the site of the Ark of the Covenant described in the Bible. Archaeologists working in Beit Shemesh had no idea they were dealing with one of the greatest shrines of antiquity. Excavations have been conducted since 2012, but a huge stone table was found only last year. But where's the Ark itself? The table is very close to the borders with Egypt, so the Ark may still be in the land of the pharaohs. The Screaming Mummy. The first screaming mummies were found in Egypt back in the 19th century. In the 1880s, archaeologists found several mummies in the royal necropolis of Deir el-Bahari near the city of Luxor, which for a long time could not be identified. But two screaming mummies were of particular interest to archaeologists. One belonged to a woman and the other to a man. For a long time, it was impossible to figure out what caused such a creepy look of these bodies. Moreover, such mummies were found later in the 20th and even 21st century. However, the creepy mystery remained unsolved. Many scientists put forward their versions and explanations, but no one had a sufficient evidence base. Fortunately, modern technology has allowed scientists to learn more about the mysterious mummies. In 2018, computed tomography came to the rescue. It showed the reason the screamers died of. It was also possible to determine their identity. Historians realized that the mummy of a man belonged to a person of royal blood. The results of the study showed that the buried man was the Prince Pentawar, son of the second pharaoh of the 20th dynasty, Ramses III. King Tut's children. For many years, the story of the two babies buried as mummies in the tomb of the famous pharaoh Tutankhamun remained a terrible mystery. However, recent research has been able to shed light on the reasons for this ritual. Scientists have long wondered whether the tiny mummies found in King Tut's tomb were prematurely born, the ruler's dead children, or perhaps sacrificial symbols of innocence to accompany him in his afterlife. DNA tests carried out in 2008 dispelled those doubts. They showed that the children were twins and that their father was a pharaoh. From a forensic standpoint, the results of the CAT scans and DNA tests are not entirely clear. Differences were found in the genetic material of the children. It was 99.7% identical, but not 100%, as it should be in the supposed case. Of course, some historians continue to doubt that King Tut's children were found in the tomb. However, many scientists believe that it is quite possible. Write in the comments, is it worth opening ancient tombs, or is it better to leave the buried alone? Next, I'll show you the strangest and creepiest creatures in Egypt that were caught on camera. Faceless. Speaking of Egypt, first of all, we think of the hot sands, in the middle of which there are tombs, pharaohs, temples, the Sphinx, and other architectural structures of antiquity. But do not forget that Egypt is not only solid dry desert. Through the country flows the Nile, a huge river, and Egypt itself is washed by the Mediterranean and Red Sea. And sometimes the seas offer surprises. For example, in 2017, a strange faceless monster was discovered on an Egyptian beach. Walking along the shore, a local came across this creepy creature with sharp teeth. In fact, the teeth are the only thing the creature has. There are no eyes or anything else on its muzzle. This is frightening, and the creature is difficult to identify. Scientists still can't guess what kind of creature washed up on an Egyptian shore in September 2017, nor can fishermen help them, despite their experience. They've never seen anything like it before. According to one version, the monster may be a mutated form of a deep-sea eel. Not a bad theory, but it hasn't been 100% confirmed. Maybe it's not an eel, but something scarier. Egypt is a land of camels, crocodiles, scarabs, and as it turned out, mutants. Mutants that are hard to believe. In August 2015, a local resident was digging a well when he suddenly stumbled upon something unusual. No, he didn't dig down to the oil and find a precious treasure under the ground. Instead, he pulled out this creature out of the ground. A strange little creature with long limbs, missing thumbs, red-brown skin, and bulging black eyes. To say the least, it's an unusual combination. The first thought that comes to mind is that it's an alien. It even looks a little bit like the aliens from the Men in Black movie. But what is it really? When the photos of the creature appeared on the internet, scientists got involved, but even they could not give a clear answer. Internet users were not left out too and began to put forward their theories. In their view, the creature could be an underground alien or a deformed human embryo. Of course, there were those who wrote that all this is nothing more than a fake or a hoax. The revolution in Egypt in 2011 was memorable in many ways. But in all this chaos, there was something else, a strange creature that appeared to people. At the beginning of 2011, a video appeared on the internet in which a glowing silhouette of some ghost on a horse can be seen during the Egyptian unrest. Many people believe that this silhouette is none other than the horseman of the apocalypse. Moreover, it's the fourth horseman of the apocalypse, which is death. This creature was incorporeal, which is understandable. The footage was shot in Cairo. There were crowds of thousands of people during the riots. It would be unreal to squeeze the whole horse through so many people. When the video appeared on the internet, users began discussing the silhouette. Someone said it was just a skillful editing, while others thought that the real horseman of the apocalypse had come to Egypt. Coincidence or not, the revolution ceased soon after its appearance. Could this mean something? This video was taken by a surveillance camera in an Egyptian hospital. At first, nothing unusual happens. A man enters the building, the automatic doors open in front of him, everything is normal. But after a while, the doors start opening and closing on their own, even though we can see that no one's around. Or is there? At some point, a strange silhouette appears in the reflection on the glass door, the nature of which is still unknown. Some people think it's the ghosts of children kneeling, and some people think that a whole bunch of ghost-like human bodies got into the frame. Skeptics have another attitude to this video. In their opinion, it's just a glare and not even worth investigating. But still, what if it's not an ordinary glare? What if a mysterious creature or a real ghost was caught on the camera? Despite the fact that it sounds absurd, we should not completely rule out such a possibility. Everyone knows about the Pyramid of Khufu, but not so many people know that at the foot of the pyramid, you can also find a lot of interesting things. For example, in the last century, in the caches at the foot, scientists found Khufu ships, two full-sized rowing boats, which were hermetically sealed under the pyramid more than 4,500 years ago. The first ship was found in 1954, and the second one was found in 1987. The second one was much smaller than the first one and, moreover, worse preserved. This find is interesting because, according to one version, the body of Khufu was transported from Memphis to Giza for burial on the ship. But some Egyptologists believe that this is not the case. In their opinion, the Khufu ship could have not a practical but a symbolic and sacral meaning. It was sealed at the foot of the pyramid so that in the afterlife the pharaoh could sail on the heavenly plane together with the sun god Ra. Tomb of the Silver Pharaoh. Unlike the legendary King Tut, Susenus I is not famous. Not so much is known about his tomb. Nevertheless, it's in no way inferior to the tomb of King Tut, and the silver sarcophagus in which Susenus I was buried was even considered more expensive than the golden sarcophagus in ancient Egypt. In fact, it was because of the sarcophagus that this place was nicknamed the Tomb of the Silver Pharaoh. The tomb was found in the middle of the last century by Pierre Montet, As they used to say in ancient Egypt, gold is the flesh of the gods and silver is the bones of the gods. In those days, silver was valued twice as high as gold. This was because gold production in the country was up to 40 tons a year, and the silver mines were located outside of Egypt. The unusual find testifies to the enormous wealth of Susenus I. Today, the treasures found in the tomb of Susenus I are preserved in the Cairo Egyptian Museum. Everyone can see the wealth of the ancient ruler in person. Not many discoveries can surpass the discovery of the tomb of the Silver Pharaoh, but they do exist. The Valley of the Golden Mummy stands out. It was found in 1996 in Bahariya Oasis in western Egypt. Zahi Hawass, who led a team of archaeologists and discovered the valley, became famous among Egyptologists after this discovery. He found about 250 mummies. It's hard to imagine that such a place has remained a secret for so long. The place got its name from the unusual mummies wearing gold masks. This is the evidence of the high origin of the buried people. Some of the mummies lay in terracotta sarcophagi, exactly replicating the shape of the heads. The gilding is very elaborate. The drawings and other decorations of the sarcophagi are very elaborate as well. Scientists estimate that the total number of burials here is about 10,000, and that they date back to the Greco-Roman period, i.e. from the end of the last era to the beginning of the modern era. Secret passage. There are many nuances connected with the Egyptian pyramids in general. For example, it's known that the pyramids are full of secret labyrinths and corridors, from which it's impossible to get out, and that secret passages lead to the pyramids themselves. However, it's not easy to find them, but an Egyptian named Naji was lucky. Digging in his own garden, a 33-year-old resident of the village of El Haramain discovered a stone slab tunnel that led directly into the Pyramid of Khufu. This discovery was almost unique of its kind. Archaeologists believe that in ancient times this passage led to a secret temple on the banks of the Nile, but they still have a long way to go to find the true purpose of this ancient tunnel. The pyramids are the hallmark of the land of the pharaohs, but many people forget about other sites, particularly the Great Sphinx of Giza. Next, I'll tell you what secrets this ancient sculpture hides in itself. Not long ago, researchers were able to find the entrance to the Sphinx secret room. For a long time, there was talk among the Egyptians that the Sphinx itself was just a peculiar tip of the iceberg, and that the most interesting thing was under it. It was believed that the entrance to the secret room was in the area of the paws of the structure or in the area of its head. The hidden door to the secret room was first reported by Egyptologist Matt Growling. According to Growling, this door was brought to the Louvre by some unknown person 2 centuries ago. However, it's not yet possible to confirm this hypothesis on 100%, as it's necessary to conduct a detailed study, which requires permission from the Ministry of Culture of Egypt. But despite the fact that the study is hampered by the state, scientists have every reason to believe that the location of the door was correct. Back in 1989, using special equipment, a group of Japanese scientists from Waseda University, headed by Professor Tsukuji Yoshimura, found a narrow tunnel under the left Sphinx paw. It led in the direction of the Pyramid of Khafra. The tunnel began at a depth of 2 meters and sloped downward. The team of scientists did not manage to get inside the room. However, they suggested exactly what the space under the Sphinx might look like. Before the Japanese scientists could conduct further research, the Egyptian authorities intervened and stopped the project. Yoshimura and his expedition were never able to return to work. The same happened to other explorers who were trying to uncover the secret of the Sphinx. The hidden space under the sculpture amazed even Egyptian scientists, many of whom did not expect such a discovery. But what exactly is inside the Sphinx, or rather under it? And why the Egyptian government does not allow researchers to be there? Many people speculate that at the end of the last century, the Egyptian authorities themselves made a scientific discovery. They discovered the Hall of Testimonies, or Hall of Chronicles, under the Sphinx, and now they're hiding it. Why are they hiding it? According to theorists, it's this hidden room that can completely change the history of the world because it contains evidence of the existence of a highly developed civilization that inhabited the Earth long ago. Obviously, it's not beneficial for the Egyptian authorities to have such information leaked. Now, scientists do not doubt the existence of a secret room or even several rooms under the Sphinx, but still do not know what exactly can be found there. Possible that the theorists are not wrong, and there's undeniable evidence in the Hall of Chronicles that the story as we know it is not true. In any case, scientists still have not lost hope of getting inside the Sphinx, finding all its mysteries, and linking the true meaning of the Sphinx's existence with the other mysteries of Egypt. Stranger. In early September 2020, archaeologists discovered 13 sarcophagi with mummies inside in the Saqqara settlement. A couple of months later, the number of found sarcophagi exceeded 100. In addition to these, various figurines were found in the mine tombs. 40 figurines depicted the deity Ptah. It used to be believed that statues with him had magical powers and helped to obtain a posthumous rebirth. Another 20 figurines were found depicting Horus, the Egyptian god of the sky, who was represented as a man with a falcon's head. That would be all right, but the scientists found 2 more wooden figurines that raised a lot of questions. The name Nomus was written on them. It would seem that there's a clue, but there isn't. The name gave scientists no information. To this day, scientists are trying to figure out who this unknown Nomus was in ancient Egyptian times. So far, the mystery's not been solved, but it's possible that by solving it, scientists can find many answers to the questions that have puzzled them for many years. Golden City. Just recently, in the spring of this year, scientists announced an outstanding find. They managed to discover the Golden City. It was founded during the time of the pharaoh Amenhotep III, who ruled ancient Egypt in the 14th century BC. The city was once the largest administrative center of the region, but then it was abandoned, after which the city was covered with sand and it was lost. Fortunately, during excavations near Luxor, archaeologists were able to find the city. The streets of the city are divided by houses. The walls of some of them are 3 meters high. In the course of excavation, scientists were able to discover the different areas of the city: administrative, residential, and industrial, where there was a site for the production of bricks and molds for the manufacture of objects made of metal and glass were found. But what's the significance of the discovery in general? First, to discover an entire city that had been hidden under sand for thousands of years is cool. Second, according to scientists, the discovery of the lost city provides a rare opportunity to see how the ancient Egyptians lived at a time when the country was at its peak of its prosperity. In addition, the discovery of the city will help scientists to shed light on one of history's greatest mysteries: why Akhenaten and Nefertiti decided to move to Amarna, a settlement on the east bank of the Nile. This will allow them to fill important gaps in the study of ancient Egyptian history. Giant. A few years ago, scientists studied the mummy of Pharaoh Sennacht. The pharaoh himself was a little-known ruler. Scientists do not know much about him. They believe he was the 3rd or 4th pharaoh of the 3rd dynasty. His mummy would not have attracted attention at all, but as it turned out, Sennacht was a real giant. Analysis of the mummy showed that when he was alive, the pharaoh was 198 centimeters tall. For comparison, average height of ancient Egyptians during his reign was 170 centimeters. Scientists believe that Sennacht suffered from gigantism and that he was generally the very first giant in the history of mankind. They believe that Sennacht developed a tumor in his pituitary gland, causing his brain to produce too much growth hormone. But how exactly did he get this tumor? What triggered the pharaoh's gigantism if, according to the researchers, such giants had never been seen before? Or maybe scientists are all wrong and Sennacht was just one of many giants that used to roam the earth everywhere. So far, it's not known. But if it's confirmed, then we'll be able to look at the world's history in a completely different way. Jewelry. In 1911, a group of archaeologists excavated a tomb in the settlement of El Gerza. What they found was an ancient tomb buried underground for nearly 5,000 years. A tomb that held secrets that scientists could never have imagined. Inside, they found a string of 9 cylindrical beads. That would have been all right, but they were made of iron. Historians believe that the Iron Age began in Egypt around 600 BC, when the Egyptians began to smelt their own iron. The tomb, however, has been dated back to 3,350 BC, about 2.5 millennia before iron was buried there. So where'd this iron come from? Puzzled scientists speculated that it might have come from outer space. The piece of jewelry was probably made from particles of an iron meteorite that fell in Egypt before the Iron Age period. This is interesting in itself, but it's also interesting that impurities of cobalt and germanium were found in the piece of jewelry. This fact fully confirms the cosmic origin of the piece of jewelry. Moreover, the age of the find suggests that perhaps these beads were not processed on Earth because blacksmithing did not exist back then. Does this mean that the tomb contained not just a piece of jewelry made of cosmic materials, but jewelry made by aliens? Sounds crazy, but this is the point of view held by many theorists and even some scientists who cannot explain the find otherwise. Black sarcophagi. One of the strangest and most mysterious Egyptian discoveries of recent times is considered to be the 24 giant black sarcophagi. They were discovered in the Serapeum of Saqqara near Cairo. The sarcophagi do not resemble those in which ancient Egyptians were usually buried. Each weighed 100 tons and was finely crafted. This, by the way, is one of the main mysteries of the sarcophagi. Scientists do not understand how thousands of years ago, craftsmen managed to create something like that. The second mystery is that the black sarcophagi were empty. There were no human or even animal remains inside. What were they made for then? And why was it necessary to make such large, heavy, and elaborate sarcophagi? Scientists have no answers to these questions, but some theorists are sure that these sarcophagi could have been left on Earth by mysterious aliens. Do you believe in aliens? Let me know in the comments. Next, I'll tell you about the archaeological finds that will turn our history upside down. A new type of ancient man. In 2021, the remains of a previously unknown species of ancient people were found in Israel. During excavations of the limestone quarry of Nashar Ramla, scientists found fragments of human skull and jaw, which age ranges from 120 to 140,000 years. Petrified bones and jaw clearly did not belong to a species of Homo sapiens. The remains, according to scientists, were more like Neanderthals, but with great reserve. Thus, scientists could not assign the remains to any of the known human genus or species. Therefore, the new species of people got its name, Nashar Ramla Homo. Scientists stress that such a discovery could dramatically change our ideas about the history of human evolution. In 2019, a rock painting was discovered on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi. It would seem that new rock paintings are discovered almost every year on Sulawesi. So what's so special about this particular painting? It's the fact that this rock painting was the oldest known work of narrative painting at the time. Its age, according to scientists, is at least 44,000 years old. But the picture found on the wall of a cave in Sulawesi depicts not just a few interesting lines, it's a whole scene in motion and development. Scientists were able to determine that the drawings were painted at the same time, so it's definitely some kind of story. But why some? It's a hunting scene. In addition, those who left us this picture obviously showed imagination, because the pictures depicted there are not really people. These are some mythical creatures that combine features of humans and various animals. It's noteworthy that the area covered by the drawings is almost 5 meters wide. There you can see 2 dwarf buffaloes, one of which is surrounded by several hunters with spears and possibly ropes in their hand, as well as local wild pigs. Not so long ago, anthropologists and archaeologists believed that rock art, Venus figurines from the Upper Paleolithic era, and other Stone Age art were associated exclusively with European populations of ancient people. However, a few years ago, researchers found that Neanderthals were also able to draw. Moreover, it was discovered that the oldest drawings of Homo sapiens are actually in Southeast Asia, not in Europe, as previously thought. 1 year later, on the same Indonesian island of Sulawesi, in a limestone cave, archaeologists found an even more ancient rock painting. It depicts a life-size boar. The age of the image is about 45,500 years. Its size is about 136 by 54 centimeters. The naturalistic image of a pig was made by using dark red ochre. In addition to the boar on the cave wall, you can see 2 other images of pigs of the same species. Scientists believe that the ancient artist depicted Celebes warty pigs. These are endemics of Sulawesi, which are still found there and on the nearby islands. When did art appear? Over the past 3 decades, archaeologists studying the subject have tried to gather detailed information about the origins of various art forms and the development of artistic traditions. In 2020, they managed to discover and present to the public another very interesting thing. A small bird figurine carved from burnt bone was found at one of the sites of ancient people in Henan province of China. According to researchers, the age of the discovery ranges from 13 to 14,000 years. The authors of the discovery immediately stressed that the found figure was preserved in excellent condition. And indeed, look how well the outlines can be traced. Scientists have suggested that this is a bird of the passerine order. The find of burnt bone pushes back the appearance of the first animal sculptures in East Asia by more than 8,500 years. According to scientists, the discovery points to the original artistic tradition. It could certainly be the missing link that could help to trace the origin of Chinese sculptures in the Paleolithic period. Not so long ago, during the research on the banks of the San Pedro River, archaeologists discovered many buildings. They belong to the Maya civilization. This is the oldest and largest of the temple complexes of the Indians known today. The estimated time of its creation is between 1,000 and 800 years BC. The discovery was made thanks to LiDAR survey, which allowed finding the presence of an artificial object of enormous size under the surface. Exploring this area with the help of LiDAR technology, scientists saw buildings and palaces, an extensive network of roads, defensive structures, and religious buildings. Archaeologists are confident that this revolutionary find will completely change our knowledge about the Maya civilization. This is a real breakthrough in the relatively short history of archaeological research. Most people have always believed that the Mayan population was about 5 million people. Archaeologists now believe that with the new data, it's not unreasonable to believe that the civilization numbered 10 to 15 million people, and many of them have lived in low-lying and swampy areas, which some researchers previously considered unsuitable for habitation and farming. The Maya civilization reached its height more than 1,000 years ago and is known for its own writing and art. From the middle of the 10th century, the Maya civilization began to decline, and in the 16th century was almost completely destroyed by the Spanish conquistadors. It's possible that in the future there will be found other ruins of once thriving Mayan cities in the dense tropical forest. Giant cat in Peru. In 2020, on the Nazca Plateau in southern Peru, a very interesting image was discovered. A giant cat engraved on the hillside. In general, large-scale drawings on the surface of the land are called geoglyphs. The authors of the most famous of them are the people of the ancient civilization of Nazca. Basically, these are geometric and zoomorphic images. Geoglyphs are created by removing the top layer of rocks and soil that opens the bottom layer of yellow-gray soil. As a rule, they can be seen only from the air. Therefore, the Nazca geoglyphs were discovered only in the 20th century when the first flights over the plateau were made. But the cat was found by workers during the work to improve access to one of the viewing platforms. Then a group of archaeologists spent a week there studying the unexpected find. The geoglyph of a cat has surprisingly remained, though it's been created approximately in 100 to 200 years BC. The geoglyph of a cat has appeared more ancient than other images found in this area earlier. Maybe it's even fake, and this cat's been drawn specifically to attract more tourists? In fact, no. Nazca Plateau is a cultural monument, and everything is controlled there. Who built the pyramids of Giza? These grandiose structures have always amazed and continue to amaze. For many years, it was believed that the greatest pyramids of Giza were built by slaves. Conspiracy theorists even believe that they're the creation of aliens. But thousands-year-old burials near the pyramids suggest that the grandiose buildings were built by someone else, most likely by hired laborers. Recent discoveries prove that the pyramids were built by free Egyptians, including highly skilled specialists who were paid for their work. The first evidence was accidentally found in 1990 thanks to vigilant tourists. Information about a previously unknown adobe wall a few hundred meters south of the Sphinx, which the horse of one of the tourists tripped over, reached the chief of the pyramid security service. He handed it over to the archaeologists. They've carried out the research and have found out that the wall has appeared the part of an ancient burial place, the whole cemetery of builders of the pyramids. As a result, archaeologists excavated 30 large tombs, which most likely were designed for the wardens, and about 600 smaller tombs, which were designed for workers. Obviously, the graves of slaves could not have been in such close proximity to the sacred tombs of the pharaohs. During the excavations, they found a huge amount of livestock bones. Such a quantity was enough to feed several thousand people daily with meat. Isn't this one more proof that the pyramids were built by professionals who were treated well? In general, the construction of the pyramids and the pyramids themselves are still shrouded in mystery, and though scientists managed to solve one of them, we'll paint a full picture about the pyramids not soon. Scientists still have a lot of work to do. Next, let's move on to Siberia. Did you know that an ancient virus that's been dormant for the past 30,000 years was recently found in Siberia? Or that scary creatures are often stumbled upon here? as well as animals who can resurrect themselves? This vast cold region is fraught with secrets, which we'll now look into. Ancient virus. In 2014, a team of microbiologists from France studied the composition of ice at a depth of 30 meters. The discovery, which they managed to make, shocked scientists. It turned out that at a depth, a dangerous ancient virus was dormant for more than 30,000 years. This was the first find of a viable representative of the family of giant viruses. It's known that immediately after thawing, the virus showed signs of life and the ability to infect, which was tested on amoebas. Tests showed that the size of the virus that settled in single-celled organisms reached 1.5 micrometers. By comparison, the flu virus, known to science, does not exceed 100 nanometers in size, and this is 15 times smaller. Fortunately, the virus, discovered by French scientists, turned out not to be dangerous for people and animals. But this does not mean that there's nothing to worry about. The discovery in Siberia showed that viruses can survive in the ice for thousands of years, and that the melting of ice due to global warming may well provoke the appearance of real epidemics of ancient diseases on Earth. Scientists fear that the melting of permafrost could awaken epidemic diseases unknown to modern civilization. However, viruses that have made it to the surface do not always come to life under the strict control of scientists. In August 2016, the residents of Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug struggled with an outbreak of anthrax in the Yamal Peninsula. The cause of the epidemic was the rapid spread of the virus among reindeer, which resulted in the death of more than 2,000 animals. Scientists believe that abnormally high temperatures, which resulted in anthrax spores melting out of the permafrost, contributed to the new outbreak of the disease. However, it was too late to deal with the root cause. Urgent measures had to be taken to prevent the epidemic from spreading. Several groups of military personnel, including specialists in chemical and biological weapons, were dispatched to the area where the disease was found. The locals in the risk zone were immediately evacuated and relocated 40 kilometers away from the epicenter. Thus, the local epidemic of 2016 was handled. But what awaits us next? The mystery of craters. A lot's happened on the Yamal Peninsula in the past few years. For example, strange craters began to appear there. Scientists still can't say for what reason exactly this is happening. The first crater, about 20 meters in diameter, was spotted in July 2014 by a helicopter crew doing a routine patrol of the area. The blocks of ice and soil were scattered many meters around. Only an explosion of unprecedented size could have caused such an effect, but none of the locals saw or heard anything. But in 2017, the appearance of the crater was preceded by the testimony of a reindeer herder. The man said that he heard a strong explosion and saw clouds of smoke on the horizon. After checking the information, another crater was discovered, slightly inferior in size to its predecessor. But how did the mysterious explosions occur? Scientists speculated that the blast might have originated underground. Some researchers have jokingly dubbed hypothetical detonations ice volcanoes, but such phenomenon has nothing in common with volcanoes known to us. Although the recipe for such an explosion is relatively simple, requiring only a certain concentration of methane, ice, water, and soil. But why hasn't something like this happened before? According to scientists, global warming is to blame. It causes the increased concentration of methane in the lower layers of soil, but despite understanding the mechanism, scientists cannot predict the appearance of the next craters. Did you think it would all be limited to viruses? It turns out that scientists found more complex organisms in the melting permafrost. They were really surprised when worms, frozen in the ice about 42,000 years ago, came back to life when thawed. The discovery of multicellular organisms elated the researchers. They're now trying to figure out what allowed the worms to revive after spending many thousands of years in the permafrost. Perhaps the results of these studies will be the key to cryogenic freezing of humans. Those who still do not believe that real wonders can be hidden in the snows of Siberia, listen carefully. Recently, scientists managed to find a mammoth carcass in the ice which was untouched by time and undecomposed. Of course, unlike worms, it was impossible to bring it back to life, but the degree of preservation of the body was amazing. Even the blood in its veins was preserved. By the way, thanks to blood cells, scientists had a chance to repopulate the planet with mammoths. Of course, any experiments in this regard are still only at the stage of discussion, but biologists are more than serious. Why not? After all, mammoths disappeared from the face of the Earth relatively recently. The last mammoths went extinct only 4,000 years ago. But by the standards of history, this is almost yesterday. The idea to recreate mammoths occurred to scientists back in the 1980s. Over the past 20 to 30 years, genetic engineering and biotechnology have made such a breakthrough that it's unlikely any other field of science can match them. Scientists have learned to create genetic copies of cells and even genetic copies of whole organisms. They've learned to read genetic information and operate on it. Of these methods, cloning is the easiest one. First, it's necessary to find a living mammoth cell. Good thing that well-preserved remains have been found recently in the permafrost. Then it's necessary to grow an embryo with the help of a surrogate mother, a female Asian elephant. At first sight, everything's simple, but there's one problem that practically puts an end to this method. It's very difficult to find a living cell with a whole nucleus, because it's one thing if the species went extinct yesterday, but it's quite another if it became extinct thousands of years ago. Too much mercury. In its pure form, mercury is harmful to animals and humans. Once significant amounts of mercury enter the food chain, serious consequences for the entire ecosystem cannot be avoided. But what's Siberia to do? After all, many experts say that there's the world's largest mercury reserve. They estimate that Siberia contains about 1.7 million tons of the substance, which is almost twice as much of the rest of the planet, except it's scattered deep in the permafrost. Or is it not very deep? Mercury has accumulated since the last ice age. Over thousands of years, the toxic substance in the atmosphere has combined with soil organic matter and deposited in the permafrost. The question is, when mercury will begin to be released from the melting permafrost in such quantities that it will be a danger to humans. As a result of global warming, the permafrost is melting. Experts believe that in 100 years, this layer will shrink by at least a third. Toxic metal can escape into rivers and oceans, penetrate the soil and water sources with rain, and accumulate in the microorganisms that larger living things feed on. The Siberian alien. In October 2017, 2 Irkutsk residents discovered something truly frightening in a snowdrift. 2 students went for a walk and, on their way, discovered the body of a creature unlike any other inhabitant of the Earth. The young men confidently stated that they had discovered the body of an alien who had come from outer space and died in the snows of Siberia. The video and photos they shot were successfully sold to one of the Russian TV channels. Once on the internet, the footage also created a furor. Of course, there were ufologist specialists in the internet who claimed that it was indeed an alien creature. This was proved by its appearance, the height of about 1 meter, green skin, and body without clothes or hair. Experts assert that the alien died a tragic death because it didn't expect Siberian winters to be so severe. And here's a find that's really driven many scientists crazy. It's not every day that a new species, not only unknown to science but also unlike any other animal inhabiting the Earth, is discovered in Siberia. Miners found this unique creature on the territory of Yakutia. The body of the monster turned out to be mummified, but it was well preserved. The body resembled that of a bird, but where did the bird get its fangs and claws? No doubt the creature's relatives are long gone. It's not a particularly surprising fact for a find from Siberia. This is where many well-preserved remains of ancient giants have been found. Despite the small size of the monster, scientists believe that the creatures like it may very well have inhabited the planet during the Mesozoic. At the same time, the monster from the mine is not the only monster from Siberia. The ancient legend of the local analog of the Loch Ness Monster is very interesting. The old-timers believe that the animal's been living in the lake since time immemorial and is extremely aggressive. In the final part of this episode, I'll show you ancient structures and technologies of extraterrestrial origin that humans could not have invented. Who built the Egyptian pyramids? Science claims that professional hired laborers were responsible for that. Theorists believe that an unknown super-advanced civilization or even aliens were responsible for the construction. Sounds crazy, but why not consider such a theory? Besides, the Stone of the South of Baalbek may point to it. In general, Baalbek is an ancient city located in Lebanon. You can find many sites there, but it's the Stone of the South that's considered the most famous and mysterious of them all. One look is enough to understand. This stone is huge. No, it is rather colossal. Its weight is more than 1,000 tons. Length is about 20 meters, width and height are about 4 meters. On top of that, the stone itself is perfectly flat, smooth and hewn. Even in our time, it would be incredibly difficult or even impossible to create such a megalith, let alone the ancient people. It's hard to believe that in ancient times people could have created such a gigantic, heavy, and smooth stone without the use of modern tools. It's also difficult to believe that such a stone could have been moved because even with the use of the latest technology, it's impossible to move it. This suggests that the Stone of the South and the other colossal structures in this Lebanese city are the work of extraterrestrial civilizations. Kailasa Temple. What could be more difficult than creating such a huge stone? What about building a temple? And no, I'm not talking about an ordinary temple that's built on the ground. I mean a temple carved out of stone. The most amazing of these temples is Kailashanatha, or Kailasa Temple, which is located in the Indian village of Ellora. Kailashanatha is considered one of the largest monolithic structures in the entire world. It was carved entirely into a monolithic, solitary basalt rock. That is, such a large-scale temple complex was literally created out of rock. The scale, by the way, is amazing. The length of the temple is 55 meters, width 36 meters, and the area of the occupied surface is 1,980 square meters. The incredible scale, as well as the amazing processing of stone, executed with great precision, makes you wonder. Scientists say that the temple was created for about 100 years. This is certainly a lot, but even in such a period of time, it's almost impossible to build even approximately the same structure. Many people point out that it's unrealistic to recreate Kailasa Temple even today using rotary excavators and other modern means. There's only one possible version, though it's crazy that the temple was built by extraterrestrials. Kailashanatha is not the only mystery in India. There are many mysteries and enigmas in this country. One of them is the Iron Pillar of Delhi. It was erected in 415 AD in honor of Chandragupta II. Unlike Kailashanatha, which artistry is immediately apparent, this Iron Pillar of Delhi doesn't seem unusual. That's right, but there is one but. It doesn't rust at all. The pillar has stood for over 1,500 years and has never once rusted. This is incredible considering the fact that even now, we don't have the technology to completely protect an object from corrosion for such a long period of time. But then how were the ancient Indians able to create such a masterpiece? Science believes that the anti-corrosive properties of the pillars are due to weather conditions, treatment, and structure of the pillar, as well as a mixture of certain metals that change the physical properties of iron and do not allow it to rust. It sounds logical, but it's not clear what exactly are the properties that protect the pillar from corrosion, and why scientists have not been able to determine them accurately. Either the ancient Indians by accident created a combined anti-corrosive material, or the pillar was created by aliens. Kumbh Mayo. There are many interesting aqueducts in the world, but Kumbh Mayo is probably the most unusual and mysterious of them all. It's located 20 kilometers southwest of the Peruvian city of Cajamarca, about 3.3 kilometers above sea level. The aqueduct, which is 8 kilometers long, is attributed to the Incas. Science believes that the Incas built it about 3,500 years ago. The most striking thing is that any obstacle in the way of this aqueduct was simply ignored. In other words, the aqueduct runs right through big rocks in some places. How is this possible? How is it possible to build an 8-kilometer aqueduct running many meters through solid rocks? Bulla Island Balls. In the Caspian Sea, off the southeastern coast of Azerbaijan, there is Bulla Island. That's how it was called until 1991. Now it's called Kerizir. It was on this island in the 1970s of the last century that mysterious balls, strange spherical formations, were found. Scientists have found here 21 balls, each of which had the same structure. The balls are clearly divided into 2 equal halves by an incision. Scientists involved in the study of meteorites drew a parallel between these finds and the already well-known Wolf's Egg iron, also known as the Salzburg Cube, because the incisions on the balls were similar. After studying the composition, the scientists concluded that the balls were based on aluminum, and less than 20% of the structure was some kind of monolithic alloy of magnetite particles. The complex structure of the spheres completely excludes the possibility of their natural origin. 21 balls of exactly the same diameter, regular shape, and symmetrical separation by incisions. All these arguments prove that the mysterious balls from Bulla Island could not have formed in a natural way, and that most likely they were not created by humans at all. Mask. Many meteorites of different shapes and sizes fall to Earth, and this surprises no one. But some meteorites are still able to surprise. The most mysterious of them all is an iron meteorite called Mask. It was named for its unusual shape, which resembles an ancient mask. The meteorite was discovered in the Kalahari Desert in Botswana by a local resident. Quite impossible to take an unusual find for a meteorite at first sight, because it has a symmetrical shape with slits for the eyes and a protrusion for the nose. In this regard, many theorists believe it's not a meteorite at all, but a mold of a humanoid creature which somehow ended up in the desert. Klerksdorp spheres. In Africa, you can come across not only alien masks but also alien spheres. These unusual corrugated spheres were first discovered by miners in South Africa decades ago, and workers have been finding them regularly ever since. These spheres vary in structure. Some are homogeneous and composed of an alloy unknown to modern science, while others have an unknown white spongy substance inside. One way or another, they all have one element in common: grooves running down the center. The age of the rock, in the depths of which miners continue to find these mysterious spheres, is about 3 billion years old, so people certainly couldn't create these balls. In addition, the exact composition of the spheres is unknown, and their purpose remains a mystery to scientists. Given all this, it's not surprising that many people believe that the Klerksdorp spheres are alien artifacts. Phaistos disk. Despite the fact that the Phaistos disk was found as early as 1908, it still puzzles scholars to this day. The disk, discovered on the island of Crete, is an interesting monument of writing. The terracotta disk, about 15 centimeters in diameter, contains 241 words, created from 45 separate characters arranged in a spiral. Scientists believe the disk could belong to the Minoan culture of the Middle or Late Bronze Age, which means it could have been created around 1700 BC. That will be all right, but there are a few nuances. Firstly, the type of clay from which the disk was made is not found in Crete. Secondly, the writing on the disk is not related to any of the local languages. And thirdly, the writing itself is still a mystery. Thus, the true purpose of the Phaistos disk remains unknown. Some believe that it may have been used to depict notes. Some believe that the disk is an ancient calendar, and some believe that it may even been a typewriter. Well, that's it, guys. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so as to not miss new episodes. Thanks for watching.